Welcome to this beginner Blender tutorial series where we will be creating this low poly island. And we will be creating this using the Eevee rendering engine in Blender. And this tutorial series is very beginner friendly, so I'll be going very slowly and showing you the entire process in real time. Now you should know just a few basic things like basic navigation, just kind of moving around and just selecting objects and generally just being able to navigate in Blender. But as long as you know just the very basic things, I'll be going very slowly and showing you the entire process on how to create this low poly island. And I'm splitting up this tutorial into 3 different parts, and that way each part will be a bit shorter and a bit easier to follow. Now, just a few quick things before we get started. If you'd like to help support me and my YouTube channel, then you can purchase the tutorial files for this tutorial on my Gumroad store, and if you join my Patreon page, then you'll also get access to the tutorial files. And checking out my Gumroad store and Patreon page are really great ways to help support the channel. And you can also check out the YouTube memberships, so if you click on that join button down there next to the subscribe button, if you join my memberships, then you'll be helping to support the channel each month and you'll get some cool perks here on YouTube. And then one more thing before we get started, I want to give a huge thanks to this video's sponsor, Sketchfab. Huge thanks to this video's sponsor, Sketchfab. On Sketchfab, you can upload, buy, and sell 3D models and assets. My favorite feature of Sketchfab is that you can upload and preview your own 3D models in your browser. Sketchfab also has a 3D model store where you can purchase 3D models and assets. Check out Sketchfab with the link below. Alright, so just open up a new scene in Blender. Now, if you want to see the screencast keys, they're going to be right down here so that you can see what buttons I'm pressing. Now, we are going to be doing this tutorial in Blender's real-time render engine, Blender Eevee. So right up here on the render engine, if you click right over here on the render properties, just make sure the render engine is set to Blender Eevee. So I'm now going to hit the A key, and the A key is going to toggle between deselecting everything and selecting everything. You can see they're selected if they have those outlines there. So I now want to delete everything, so you can just hit the delete key, or you can also hit the X key and then just click on the delete right there. So I'm now going to add the object, which is going to be the island. So to do that, I'm going to press Shift A. Shift A is going to bring up the add menu, or you can also click right here on add to go to the add menu. So I'll press Shift A, and I want to add a mesh object. So we're going to go to mesh, and I'm going to go right down here, and I want to add an icosphere. And then right behind me, you can see there's that little add icosphere settings. You can just click on that little tab, and that's going to open up the add icosphere settings. So I now want to turn up the subdivision. So I'm going to click on this arrow here, and that is going to turn up the subdivision. So you can see it's much more subdivided. So I'm going to turn this up pretty high to just like a 6, and then I can click on this little thing here, and that's going to hide the add icosphere settings. And then also this timeline right here in Blender, we don't really need it, so I'm just going to close it to get rid of it. You could keep it if you want, but I don't really need it, so I'm just going to close it so we have a little bit more space here in the 3D space. So I'm just going to hover my mouse right here, and you can see the mouse changes to that little crosshair, and I'm going to click and hold my mouse down and then drag up and then drag down and then let go, and that'll close the timeline. So before I do anything else, I also want to save this Blender file. So I'm going to click on File right up here, and let's click on Save As. And then when you do that, Blender's file browser is going to appear, so you can just locate to somewhere on your computer that you want to save the Blender file. Low poly island, and I will click on Save As. So low poly island.blend. And then as you're working on the project, you can press Control S. Control S will save the Blender file. You can also click on File and then click on Save to save the Blender file. So this doesn't really look like an island right now, so what I want to do is edit this object so that it is more the shape of an island. So what I'm going to do is press the Tab key. So the Tab key is going to take me into the edit mode. Now you could also just click right here on edit mode, and you could change it to edit mode. If it's set to object mode, right here you can change between object mode and edit mode. So we are now just editing this object. So I now want to play around with the shape of this to make it more of the shape of an island. So what I'm going to do is press the O key, and the O key is going to turn on this right here, which is the proportional editing. You can also just click on that button right there, and that is going to turn on the proportional editing. So now what I'm going to do is press A to deselect everything, and then I just want to select one of these vertices right here. So just select a vertex, and then what I want to do is I want to kind of bring this out, and I kind of want to play around with just the shape of this island. So I'm going to press the G key, and the G key is going to grab whatever I have selected. selected. Now I'm going to press escape to undo that. If the proportional editing is turned off and I press G to grab, it's only going to move what you have selected. So you can see I can just move this around. I'm just going to press escape to undo that. Now instead, I want to click right here, and that is going to turn on the proportional editing, or you can also press the O key. And now when I press G to grab, you can see that it's moving along vertices which are nearby the one that is selected. Now you can see that there's also that little circle there. And so if I use my scroll wheel, I can change the size of that circle. And so if the circle is bigger, it's going to pull along more of the mesh. But if the circle is smaller, it won't pull along quite as much of the mesh. And then I will just click to place it right there. Now the best thing is to just navigate up here to look on the top. So just click with your middle mouse wheel to navigate, and you can just kind of move up here. So I'm just going to rotate up here, and then I can just select a vertex, and I can press G to grab, and I can just kind of pull this out. Select another vertex, press G to grab. And so I'm just going to create a basic island shape. So once you press G to grab, you can then scroll with your mouse wheel to make the proportional editing bigger or smaller. So I'm just going to make it something like this. And I think I will bring this out a bit farther, maybe bring this in a little bit. So something like that. Just do something that you like. So that is pretty good. So now what I want to do is I want to delete the bottom, because we're not actually going to see the bottom here. We're just going to see the top because we're going to be adding in some water. So I'm going to press the 1 on the numpad, and the 1 on the numpad is going to take me to the front view. So I now just want to delete half of it, so we need to select half of it and then delete it. So I'm going to hold down the Z button, and when I hold down the Z button, you can see that the pie menu comes up, and right now we are in the solid view, and so the solid view is going to just preview the mesh. But I want to instead go over to wireframe, so when you hold down the Z button, you can then move your mouse over to wireframe and then let go. You can also just click right here on this button, and that is going to go to the wireframe, and then this is going to go back to the solid view. Now why I want to go to wireframe is because I want to select the vertices which are behind the other vertices, because in solid view I could only select the vertices that are in the very front, but now that I'm in wireframe I can select all the vertices that are in the front and the back of the island. So I'm going to press the A key, and that'll deselect that vertice, and then I'm going to press B for the box select, and I just want to box select just kind of the bottom of the island. So I'm going to click and then drag, and I'm going to drag a box over the bottom of the island just like that, and then I can let go of my mouse button, and you can see that now just the bottom is selected. So I now just want to select the bottom half. So again, you can press the delete key, or you can also press the X key. So press X to delete, and then it's going to ask you what you want to delete, and we just want to delete the vertices. So the vertices are just those little points. So I'm going to delete the vertices. All right, so I can now hold down the Z button, go back into solid view and let go of the Z button, or you can also click right here to go to the solid view, and I can click with my middle mouse wheel to orbit around, and you can see just half of the island is there. So I'm just going to tab to go back into object mode, or you can also click right here. If you're in edit mode, you can click right here and go back into the object mode. All right, now this island is kind of smooth, and it's also not very low poly, so I'm going to be adding some modifiers onto the object to kind of make it more bumpy, and then also we're going to add another modifier to make it look more low poly. So to add the modifiers, we're going to click right over here on this wrench, and that is going to take us to the modifier properties. So I now want to click on add modifier, and to make it more bumpy, I'm going to add under deform, I'm going to add the displace modifier. Now we need to add some sort of texture to tell it how it's going to be displaced. So right here, you can see there's a little texture icon. We want to click on new, and that is going to add a new texture. Now right now it's doing something really weird, and that's because we haven't actually told it what texture to use. So what I can do is I can click right here, and that is going to take me over to the texturing tab. You can also click right here, and that's going to go over to the texturing tab. Now for the texture, you can choose what type of texture you want it to be. So right here, you can see it says image or movie, but I don't want to use that. I want to use a procedural texture within Blender. So a procedural texture is basically a texture which is built into the Blender 3D software, so it's not an external file on your computer. So if you click on the type here, I want to go right here and change this to clouds. And the clouds is basically like a noisy texture. So you can see it's going to show you a little preview, and that is what it's looking like. So now you can see that this noise texture right here, or this clouds texture, is actually distorting the mesh. So you can see that there's some little bumps, some parts are a little bit darker and some parts are a little bit whiter. And so that data is telling the mesh how it's going to be bumped in or out. Now it's really strong right now, so I do want to play around with a few more settings. One setting that we we can play with is the size. So right here you can see there is a size value, and so if you make this really big, it's going to be much more lumpy, or if you want to make it much more small, you can see it's now a bit more pokey. So I do want to change the size down a little bit, but you can change that to whatever you want. So I now want to make it less strong, and so to make this less strong, we need to click right back over here on the modifier properties, and we need to change the strength value right here on the displacement. So on the displacement modifier, you can click and drag, and that's going to make this smaller. Now what you can also do if you want to make your movements more sensitive when you're dragging this is you can hold down the shift key and then you can click and drag, and you can see it's going to make that smaller. So you can just turn the strength down. I'm going to make mine pretty small to just something like that, like maybe like a 0.2. You could also click on this and then just type in a number like 0.2. So 0.2 is pretty good for me. All right, now it doesn't look super low poly. It does look a little bit low poly, but I want to make it more low poly. So let's click on add modifier, and I'm going to go right down here under generate, and I'm going to add the decimate modifier. Let's also press Ctrl S to save. As you're working on your Blender projects, don't forget to just press Ctrl S to save your project. All right, so we now have the displacement modifier right up here, and then after that we have the decimate. So what the decimate modifier does is it takes away more and more of the mesh. So I can just click right here on the ratio, and I can just turn this ratio down, and you can see that as I start to turn it down, there's going to be less and less of the mesh. So the decimate modifier is going to take away more of the mesh, but it's going to try to keep its shape. So you can really change this to whatever you want. If you want a more high poly object, something like that, you could do that. Or if you want to turn the ratio way down and make it very low poly, you could go like that. I'm going to make it a little bit more dense, something like that. So you can just play around with that to whatever you want. And you can later on go back and edit this value if you want to. All right, now this island is kind of pretty high. You can see how high it's going up. And so what I'm going to do is press the tab key again, and that's going to go into edit mode. And it's going to show me the original geometry before we added those modifiers. So what I want to do now is press the A key, and the A key is going to select everything. And I just want to kind of squish this mesh down so that it is smaller. So I'm going to press the S key, and the S key is the shortcut key to scale objects. And then I want to scale the mesh down, up and down. So I'm going to hit the Z button, and the Z button is going to scale the mesh down only on the Z axis. So the Z axis is going up and down, and then this is the Y axis, and that is going forward and backwards. And then this right here, that is the X axis, and that is going left and right. So by pressing S to scale, and then Z, that is going to constrain the scale to only the Z axis, so it'll bring it up and down. So I'm just going to make it a lot smaller, just kind of squish it down. We're basically just squishing the island down, and then just click and place it right there. And then I also want to bring the island down so it's more to where that grid is. So I can press the G key, and the G key is going to grab everything, and I'm just going to bring it down kind of like that. All right, so I can now press the tab key to go back into object mode, and you can see there we have it. So now the island is much smaller. So I now want to add a new object to be the ocean. Now, whenever you add new objects, the objects are always going to be added wherever the 3D cursor is. So the 3D cursor is that little thing right there. Now I want the object to be added in the very center of this entire 3D scene. So I'm going to press Shift S, and then you can see that when you press Shift S, this pie menu comes up, and you have a bunch of different settings here, but don't worry about all these settings. We just want to go right here to the cursor to world origin, and then I want to let go of the Shift and S button. And now that 3D cursor that was right over here, when you press Shift S, go to cursor to world origin and let go, you can see it's now in the very center there. So I can now press Shift A, or you can click right here on the add menu, Shift A, and I'm going to go right here to mesh, and I want to add a plane because a plane is nice and flat, so it'll work really well for the ocean. So I'm going to add a plane, and you can see the plane is added right there in the center. Now that's way too small, so I'm going to press the S key, and the S key is going to scale it up, and we don't actually need to scale the object up in edit mode like we did for the island object. We can scale the entire object up in object mode just by pressing S to scale, drag your mouse out, and then click to place that. So I want to scale it up pretty big. I'm going to scale it up pretty big because I want the ocean to be going way out in the horizon. And then if you zoom into the island, you can just select the island. And again, I use the right click select because I used Blender back when right click select was the default, but now left click select is is the default, and that makes more sense because most programs use left click, so just left click to select the object. So you can just select the island object, and then I can press G to grab, and then I can press Z, and that is going to bring it up and down on the Z axis, and you can just bring that island up and down until it's a size that you want, something like that. So if you want to bring it more into the water, you can bring it down or you can bring it up. And also, if you want to adjust the shape of the island, now that you can kind of see the water, you can press the tab key, and that will go into the edit mode. And then again, you can just select a vertex, and you can press G to grab, and you can just kind of bring this island out, just kind of make it longer or whatever you want to do. So you can just kind of adjust the shape, maybe bring that down a little bit so it's a bit more flat, something like that. All right, so I'm now going to create one of the palm trees. So again, I'm going to press Shift S, so hold down the Shift and S button, and I want to move over to cursor to world origin, just to make sure that 3D cursor is in the center there, and it is. So I'm now going to press Shift A. Shift A will go to the add menu, and I'm going to go to mesh because I want to add another mesh. And so for the tree, I'm going to add a circle. Now when you add the circle, you can't really see it, and if you click with your middle mouse wheel and kind of navigate down here, you can see it's down there. So to be able to see the circle better, I'm going to hold down the Z button, go into the wireframe, and then let go, and now we can see that circle. Now before you move the circle, you're going to click right here behind me, and you can see that there is the add circle settings. So just click on that little tab, and that's going to open it up. Now you can see there is the vertice count, and the vertice count is pretty high on default. It's set to 32, and so I don't want it to be that high because that's pretty high. So I'm going to click on the vertice count to change it, and I'm going to instead change the vertice count to 8. So I'm going to type in 8 and enter. And especially because this is a low poly scene, we want it to look very low poly, so I want to turn the vertices way down. And then you can just click on that there to hide the add circle settings. All right, so I now want to bring the tree up, so I'm going to press G to grab. G is going to grab the object, and then I can press Z, and we're going to bring that up. And then I can press S to scale, and we want to scale that down. Now this doesn't really look much like a tree right now, but this is going to be the trunk of the tree, and we are going to extrude it up. So what I want to do is hold down the Z button and then go back into solid view and let go. And so now what I want to do is go into the edit mode so that we can edit the object. So again, you can press the tab key, or you can click right here and go to the edit mode. So I'm now going to press the A key, just tap the A key a few times to make sure everything is selected. And then I want to extrude up the mesh. So I'm going to press the E key, and E is going to extrude this up. And then I can hit the Z button, and the Z button is going to constrain it to the Z axis. So it'll only bring it up on the Z axis, and just click to place it there. So I can now press E to extrude again. And then I want to press R to rotate, and you can see that we still have the proportional editing on, and I don't want the proportional editing to be on anymore. So I'm just going to right click to undo that movement. And then what I'm going to do is press the O key or click right here to turn off the proportional editing. So I can now press R to rotate and S to scale, and I want to just kind of scale this down, and I'll just bring it kind of over there. And I actually want to press G to grab and just kind of move it over here. We're just kind of making the trunk just a little bit random, so it's not going straight up. Maybe I'll press S to scale again and just scale that up a little bit. And then I can press E to extrude again, kind of bring that up, and I'll press S to scale, and we'll just scale that down a little bit. All right, something like that. Now, right now the object is actually kind of flipped, and so what I want to do is I want to flip the normals or recalculate the normals so that it is not flipped. So what I'm going to do is double tap the A key, and double tapping the A key will make sure everything is selected. And then to recalculate the normals, I can press Shift N, and you can see that now it's kind of flipped. That shading looks a bit different, and so I just knew that the normals needed to be flipped because the shading looked a bit off. Now if you're not sure if your mesh is flipped, if you're not sure if you need to recalculate the normals, what you can do to find out for sure is to press the tab key, and that will take you back into object mode. And then you can go right here and you can click on this little arrow, and that is going to open up the overlays. And then I want to go right down here, and you can click on face orientation. So you can see that everything looks blue, and that is what I want. But if you look on the other side of the mesh, everything is red. So if I just press Control Z to undo what we did, I'm just going to press Control Z. You can see I knew the normals were flipped because the shading looked a bit weird, and you can see that it is red. But you don't want to see the red because the red is the inside of the face, but then the blue is the outside side of the face. So you can press Shift N when everything is selected on the object, and that'll recalculate the normals. And then let's just click on edit mode and we can go back to the object mode. So then to turn off the viewport overlays, I can just click right here and I want to turn off the face orientation. All right, let's press Control S again to save. So I now want to create some coconuts kind of on the top of the tree. So I'm going to press Shift A again. Shift A will add objects, and I want to go to mesh, and I want to go right down here, and I want to add an icosphere. Now again, right behind me, if you click on the little add icosphere settings right there, I want to change the subdivisions. So the subdivisions are pretty high right now, and I don't want it to be that high. So I'm going to click on this little button to turn these subdivisions down, and I just want to bring the subdivision level to a 2, and then I can close the add icosphere settings. So I can now press G to grab, and we're going to bring the coconut up, and I can press S to scale, and we can kind of bring that down, and I can now press G, and G will grab the object, and then again I'll press S to scale, and I just want to stick that coconut kind of right there on the top. And then I want to have 3 coconuts. I think that looks pretty cool for this stylized tree. So I'm going to press Shift D. So Shift D is the shortcut key to duplicate anything. So Shift D will duplicate whatever you have selected, and because we are in object mode, we have this entire object selected. So when you press Shift D, it's going to duplicate the object. So I can now scale this down, kind of bring that in, and then I want to duplicate this over one more time. So I'll press Shift D to duplicate, and then S to scale, and just kind of bring that in there. All right, something like that. And then if you need to, you can select the coconuts. You can press G to grab and just kind of move them over. All right, just like that. That is pretty good. Let's press Control S again to save. So I now want to create those big branches or those big leaves which are on the top of the palm trees. So I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to go here to mesh, and to make those leaves, I want to add a plane. So when you add the plane, it adds it down here because that is where the 3D cursor is, but I want to be able to see it better. So I'm going to press G to grab, and then I will hit Z, and I'm going to bring it up on the Z axis, and then just click to place it right there. I'm now going to press the tab key, and that will take me into edit mode. Now both sides of the branch is going to be the same, so what I can do is I can actually add a modifier to mirror one side over to the other side. So I'm going to click on add modifier right here, and then I want to go right down here under generate, and I want to add the mirror modifier. Now it doesn't look like it's done anything, but that's because I need to press G to grab, and then I need to press X to bring it out on the X axis, and you can see now it is being mirrored. So we now have 2 different planes. Now right in the middle, I want them to be joined together. So what I'm going to do is click on this clipping button, and that way when they are going right into the center of the mirror, they're going to be merged together. So I'm now going to press G to grab, and let's hit X again to bring it over on the X axis and just push it together, and now you can see that it's joining together right there in the center. So I'm just going to press the A key again to select everything, and I'll press G to grab, and then let's hit X again, bring it in even more. All right, so I now want to select this vertex, and then I also want to select this vertex. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and then select the other vertex. And then I want to preview this from the top view. So I'm going to hit the 7 on the numpad, and that is going to take me to the top view. So I can now press E to extrude, and then I want to hit X to bring it out on the X axis. Just click to place that. And then I can press S to scale, and we're going to scale that down. Just click and place it there. So I can now press E to extrude again, kind of bringing that out. Let's hit X to bring it out on the X axis. Click to place that, and then I will press S again, and we will scale that down and just bring it in like that. So you can now see we kind of have a basic branch shape. Now I also want to select this vertex and then shift select this vertex, so we have both of those selected, and I want to scale them out a little bit more. So I'm now going to press S to scale, and we will scale those both out. So now that is kind of a nice curve shape. And then I also want to add a loop of vertices right here in the center so that we can bring it up, and that way it's gonna kind of make the branch curve a bit back and forth. So to add a loop right in here, I'm going to press Control R, and Control R is the shortcut key to add a loop cut. So you can now move your mouse around, and it's going to show you all the different options of where you can add a loop cut. So I can just left click right here, and then that is going to take me to the edge slide, but then I don't want to edge slide it. I want it to be right in the very center. So I can then right click, and that'll bring it back to the center. So you can now see we have a loop cut right there. Now I want to kind of bring this up. So what I want to do is actually click on this button right here, or press the O key, and that is going to turn on that proportional editing that we used earlier. So I now want to just kind of bring these vertices up. So I'm going to press G to grab, and then I'm going to hit Z, and bring it up on the Z-axis. And I can scroll my mouse wheel down a little bit so that those aren't being pulled up quite as much, and I'll just bring them up a little bit and then click to place that. So now you can see that is kind of rotating up. Now I also want it to rotate up in the center. So what I want to do is just select this vertex, hold down the Shift key, and then select this vertex, and then continue to hold down the Shift key and select this vertex. So I can now press G to grab, and then I can also hit the Z key, and that's going to bring it up on the Z axis. But if I start to bring this up, you can see it kind of rotates down. So it's kind of not really the angle that I want. So I'm going to right click just to undo that. What I instead want to do is I want to click right here on this arrow here, and we now have some settings right here, and these settings are going to change how the proportional editing pulls the vertices. So just click right here, and on default it's set to smooth. I instead want to change it to sphere so that it is more of a circular shape. So I can now press G to grab and then Z, and we're going to bring it up on the Z axis, and I can scroll my mouse wheel, just make it a bit bigger, and you can see that now that is nice and rotated. So I can just click to place that, and you can see that is kind of rotated up in the center, and then it kind of rotates down on either side. So I can now press the tab key to go back to object mode. You can see that's looking really nice. Let's press Control S to save our project, and now I want to give this branch some thickness. So we can actually add a modifier to give the object some thickness. So I'm going to click right here on add modifier, and I'm going to go right down here under generate. We're going to go right down here, and we're going to add the solidify modifier. So now if you look right up close there, you can see it just has a little bit of thickness. And so I now want to change this thickness value right here. And when you change that thickness value, you can see now it's going to be more thick. So you can just change that thickness value to whatever looks good to you. And you can also hold down the Shift key as you drag the thickness value, and that's going to make your movements more sensitive. So you can kind of get it closer to how you want. So I'm just going to make mine about that thick, maybe just a little bit thinner, and that is pretty good. Let's press Control S again to save. Now what I want to do is I want to bring the entire leaf down right over here to where that little orange dot is, and that is the origin point of the object. Because if I press R to rotate, it's going to rotate by where the origin point is. So I don't want it to rotate all around like this. I want it to rotate by where the starting of the branch is. So what I need to do first is apply the mirror modifier so that both sides are geometry. So right here on the mirror modifier, I can click on this little drop down right here, and I want to click on apply. So right now, if you tab to go into edit mode, you can see that this side is being mirrored over to this side. But if I press tab to go back into object mode, I can now click right here, and then I can click on apply. So now that the mirror modifier is applied, just hit the tab key to make sure you go into edit mode. And I'm going to press the A key to select everything. So just double tap the A key to make sure everything is selected. And I now want to press G to grab, and then I'm going to hit X to bring everything over on the X axis. And I'll just bring it over kind of like that. And then I can press G to grab, and then I can hit the Z button and then bring it down on the Z axis like that. So now you can see that little origin point is right there at the end of the leaf. So if I now tab to go back into object mode, I can press R to rotate, and you can see that it's going to rotate by that origin point. And this will be really helpful for when we're placing the leaves. So I'm going to press S to scale, and I want to scale the leaves down, or the scale of branches down, because it's way too big. And I can press G to grab, and I'm going to bring this way down here. And I just want to bring the branch right down there so that right at the very top of the tree trunk is where the branches start. And then I also want to scale the whole thing down, and you can see this is what's so useful about having the origin point right there, because when I scale it, it's going to be scaled from the center, so I don't have to replace it. I can just scale it and it'll go closer to the tree. So now what I want to do is press R to rotate. I'll just kind of rotate this up, and what I want to do is I want to have about 8 of these branches. So I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate, and I'll just bring this branch over just a little bit so it's just slightly offset, and then I can press R to rotate, and I can just rotate this around, and you can just kind of rotate it and just kind of navigate and then rotate it. And you can see why this is so useful, because I don't need to replace each leaf. I can just rotate it, but they're all going to be in the very center there of that tree. And you can also double tap the R key, and that is going to turn on the trackball rotation. So just hit the R key twice, and then you can have much more control over where you want to rotate it. Now I want it to look good from the camera's perspective, so we should add a camera. So what I'm going to do is press Shift A. Shift A will go to the add menu, and I want to go right down here to camera. So we're going to add a camera, and the camera is where the scene is actually going to be rendered. So add a camera. Now the camera is going to be added right down here. You can press G to grab and just kind of move it up. But what I want to do is I want to put the camera at the front view. So if I press the 1 on the numpad, that is going to take me to the front view. So I now just want to bring the camera right here. So what I'm going to do is zoom in, and then to bring the camera to this location, I can press Control Alt Numpad 0, and Control Alt Numpad 0 is going to bring the camera to where you are. So I can now press G to grab. Just make sure you have the camera selected by clicking on that outline there. You can press G to grab, and that is going to move the camera around, and it also jumped us into the camera's perspective. If you press the 0 on the numpad, that is going to toggle between the normal view where you can look around by clicking and holding with your middle mouse button, or you can press the 0 on the numpad, and that is going to jump you into the camera's perspective. And wherever the camera is, that's what it's going to render. So I can now press G to grab, just kind of bring it down, and then I can also press G to grab, and then I can double tap the Z key. So if you double tap the Z key, now the camera is going to go in and out, and I can just bring it over there, and then I can press G to grab and just bring it over there. I can also press R to rotate, and then I can rotate it on the Z axis, and I can rotate the camera around, and I just want the camera to be looking at the island, and I'll bring it down a little bit. So the tree is way too big, so I want to now select all the tree and just kind of scale it down. So I'm going to select this object right here, and then I will hold down the shift key, and I'm going to select this object, and then continue to hold down the shift key and just select all these other objects here. So all of these objects are selected. So I can now press S to scale, and I want to scale the whole tree down, and I'll also press G to grab, and I want to stick it right there. Maybe make it a little bit bigger, but I just want to stick it right there. So I now just want to duplicate the branches so that it looks good from the camera's perspective. So I'm going to select the branch, and I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate, and then you can actually just hit the R key right after that, or you can also double tap the R key, and that's going to go to the trackball rotation. And I can also press S to scale and just kind of scale a branch, and I'm just going to rotate the branch to something that looks good. So I have 3 branches now, but I want to create about 8 branches. So I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate, Shift D, and then just place it right there. And then I can double tap the R key, and double tapping the R key will use the trackball rotation. And I'm just going to rotate this around, also just rotate it there. And also you can press the period on the numpad, and that's going to zoom you into whatever object you have selected. And then you can just press R to rotate and just kind of rotate that branch, and you can also scale it a little bit. Now what I can also do is I can have each branch have a little bit of a different shape. So what I'm going to do is press the tab key, and that will take me into edit mode of this branch. And then we already have the proportional editing turned on. You can press the O key if it is not turned on. So just press the O key to toggle that on and off. So I want it to be turned on, and I can now just select one of these vertices, and I can press G to grab, and then I want to scroll with my mouse wheel to kind of make that a bit smaller. And also you can see that it's kind of bringing it around in kind of a weird shape. So I want to click right here, and instead of having it set to sphere, I want to change it back to the default, which is smooth. So I can now press G to grab, and you can see that looks much more smooth. So just select some of the vertices and press G to grab, and you can just make it a little bit different. So if you want to have one branch be a little bit thicker, one branch be a little bit thinner, just kind of play around with that shape. Maybe one branch is a bit more curved, whereas another is not. And then I can press the tab key, and that's going to take me back into the object mode. So I can now press Shift D to duplicate. So Shift D is going to duplicate that object. And then I can press R to rotate, just kind of rotate that over and rotate it down. So I'll just make another one. So Shift D to duplicate and R to rotate. Also, I'm going to double tap the R key to use the trackball rotation. So we now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I want to add like a couple more. And remember to press the 0 on the numpad, and that's going to take you into the camera's perspective. And I want to make it look good from the camera's perspective, because the camera is where it's going to render from. So I'll press Shift D to duplicate, and then R to rotate. Just kind of rotate that down, and then again Shift D to duplicate, and then double tap the R key just to kind of rotate that branch over. And I think I will add just one more or two more. So I'll press Shift D to duplicate. Let's scale this one down here, maybe make that one just a little bit smaller. And then what I can also do is tab to go into edit mode, and again just play around with the shape. So I'm going to select this vertex, and then I will press G to grab, make that a little bit smaller, maybe move it down a little bit, maybe select this one and press G to grab and move it up a little bit. And I can also play around with any of the other vertices. So if you want to just tab into edit mode on any of these other objects, you can just kind of play around with the scale of that. All right, I'll press tab to go back into object mode, maybe just one more object. So I'm going to select this one. I'll press the tab key to go into edit mode, and then I can just select this vertex, and I can press G to grab and maybe just make that a little bit thicker, something like that. All right, press tab to go back into object mode, and then you can press the 0 on the numpad, and that'll take you into the camera's perspective, and that's looking pretty good. I might just want to scale out some of these a little bit, just scale them out so they're a little bit bigger. But that is looking pretty cool. All right, so with the modeling of the tree finished, this is going to wrap it up for part 1 of the low poly island tutorial series. So I hope you were able to easily follow along, and thank you so much for watching. And if you'd like to watch part 2, I will have part 2 right up there in the end screen, and also the link will be in the video description to part 2. And in part 2, we are going to be doing a lot more of the modeling, and we'll be creating more objects in the 3D scene. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in part 2.